Good morning. Welcome to this online lecture series being organized by the Department of English, University of Gaurbanga. As we all know, due to the lockdown situation, we have to do away with regular classes for the time being. But we are actually giving online lectures to our students. All the faculty members are actually following specific schedules. Still, the Department of English has thought it proper to supplement the teaching efforts of its faculty members by inviting external experts, speakers with undoubted expertise and experience to shed light on certain aspects of English studies with an eye for the PG syllabus, because this online lecture series is basically for the PG students. We are really fortunate today to have in our midst one of the very senior and well-loved teachers with undoubted expertise, Professor Himadri Lahiri. I have to thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and giving your valuable time. Professor Himadri Lahiri is a retired professor of English and Culture Studies of Burdwan University, and at present he is the professor of English, School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Netaji Subhash Open University. Today, he has kindly consented to shed light on research methodology. So without further ado, let me request Professor Himadri Lahiri to address the students. And unfortunately, I will not be able to stay for the whole class, but let me assure my students that they are really in for a treat. Okay, Himadri, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Amit. Good morning, everyone, colleagues and friends and students. It's always pleasure to meet you. At Gaurbanga University, I always feel at home. That's my second home. So it's always pleasure for me to come to talk to you, to discuss certain aspects of academic interest and to interact with you. Today I have been asked to talk about methodology, and talking about methodology is, as you know, is a bit difficult. Because from the point of view of the students also, it is very difficult to take a subject like methodology, which might not be as interesting as literature proper. But then, basically for students, it is also necessary to have some ideas about methodology, mainly because they are supposed to take part in certain research activities where we have to follow certain methods and methodologies, and therefore it is always profitable to discuss an aspect like methodology for students and teachers of English departments. But then you see that I will of course begin by making the first statement that doing research in English departments or humanities is always a difficult thing to do, because from the methodological point of view, we have not yet formulated what can be called methodology proper. Okay, we have been heavily dependent on social studies and their methodologies. Therefore, what happens is that in every step we follow the social science people. Okay, that is what I always that is what I always stress. So it is yet, we have not yet arrived at very well formulated, very agreed methodological formulations. And from that point of view, we have to think on our own. You see that there are very interesting points that actually Professor Nashane made in a foreword to a book. And I will quote him because that can give us certain idea about what he means and what I also mean, what I accept. He said in a recent book that social science research methods have grown in the shadow of the natural science method. So you see that social science people are also not very certain about their own position, the status of research methodology there, because they think, many of them think, that their methodologies are a bit derivative, a methodology or methodologies that come from the science proper, that come from natural sciences. So from that point of view, social science people themselves are not certain about their own positions. But then you see that from that point of view, I can make a statement like that we people who belong to, who are located in English departments, our methodologies have grown in the shadow of social sciences. So from that point of view, we are also dependent on the research methods and methodologies of the social sciences. Why do I say this? You know that when we did our researches, when I did my own research at the MPhil level in the 1980s and PhD at the 1990s, you see, there was nothing called methodologies at that time. Okay, we didn't talk much about methodologies, neither did our teachers. And that is why you see that we have not yet developed methodologies properly as yet. So that point has to be kept in mind, and we are depending much on social sciences. But then the basic difference between the researchers in social sciences and researchers in humanities, especially literature departments, is that we don't conduct our researches in the laboratories. So we don't have to have that kind of experiment which scientists do at the laboratories. And because they speak of doing experiments in the laboratories, they also speak of hypotheses, they speak of aims and objectives. So all these terms we have derived from the social sciences and the science people. So this we should keep in mind, basically, as a historical, at this historical moment, we are trying to find our own feet in our own science, in our own areas. So the historical knowledge is a bit necessary. You know that English department started talking of methods and methodologies in the 1990s. And in England, you see the results began to appear in the first 3-4 years of the new millennium. In 2002, a research report was published. In 2003, a very important book that I often refer to, and you must keep this book in mind, Research Methods for English Studies. This is one of the rare books. Very few books have been written on from the perspectives of English departments or English studies. So this is one such book. This was originally published in 2003. So from that point of view, the early years of the new millennium was the starting point or rather the last decade of the last century was the starting point for thinking about research methodologies in English departments or for English studies. So this is very important, as you know. As you know that the person I have already mentioned, Nashane, he also referred to Auguste Comte. You know, Auguste Comte was a French philosopher, and he considered all sciences, be it natural science or social science or historical science. He felt that all sciences actually share the same methodologies, okay? And he gave a priority to the methodologies of the natural sciences, because in the evolution of the methodology, he thought that natural sciences are rather in a better position. So from that point of view, he felt that the research methodologies for all these sciences should be similar, although may not be exactly the same, but they may be similar. So you see that Auguste Comte's point clearly suggests that in the beginning was confusion. For us also, in the beginning was confusion, and we are trying to come out of this confusion. Okay. Now, you know that there is a philosopher called Windenberg. He talked of two kinds of research approaches. One is nomothetic, and the other one ideographic. Nomothetic is actually depends on the generalities. Okay, it depends on the generalized ideas that we derived from a class of documents, a class of materials, a class of researches, and therefore we arrive at certain decisions on the basis of our researches or our approaches. That is called nomothetic. The ideographic approach was, interestingly, they focused on particular phenomena. Okay, the earlier one, nomothetic, actually focused on the general phenomena, many phenomena. But you see, ideographic research basically was based on particular phenomena. Now you see that if we think from the perspective of English studies, we will find that both these approaches are very, very relevant, because theories are basically generalization. Theories actually talk about what we can apply more or less to a larger specific areas, larger specific, you see, topics or texts. In the analysis of many texts, you can, for example, apply the theory called feminism, or the theory called post-colonialism or postmodernism. So you see that nomothetic kind of approach and ideographic approach, both these approaches are very, very important for us. So you see, in English studies, we choose a particular area. Then we focus on certain texts. And a single text or a number of texts, those are specific texts or specific authors have written those texts. So we approach both from the particular, and ultimately, while in the course of our discussion, analysis, we arrive at some kind of generalized situations. So generalities and particularities, both these are very important in our research areas. So this point is very important. This can be our starting point. But you know that when we talk about researchers in English studies, every one of you are in is in some way or other involved in researches, and you know the problems that we face. For us, the basic focus is the text. We basically approach a particular text from particular theoretical points of view or theoretical frameworks. From that point of view, we do not have much emphasis on experiments that are carried forward, carried out in laboratories or in cases of social sciences. So experimentations we can use in a different sense altogether. Experimentation is not applicable from the point of view of social science or science. So what is important for us is to focus on the ways we carry out our researches. Now, when we think of researches, when we think of our PhD topics, when we think of our MPhil topics, or when we think of the MPhil areas of research, what is important is that we choose our areas, research areas, very, very carefully. And then we can come down to our research topic. So we have talked of two terms. One is research area and the other one is research topic. What is the basic difference between these two? You know that area, the very word area suggests a larger field of studies. Okay, so research area means that you are excluding many areas and want to focus on a particular area. For example, Victorian period. Okay, this is a larger area for you, or the Romantic period, British Romantic poets. That may be called an area, or post-colonial literature for that matter. So you choose an area and then you come down to a narrower slice of area which can be called research topic. I always suggest that you students, dear students, you choose your area on your own. Don't depend on your teachers, because the teachers will have their own areas of preferences. But when you do your research, it is your responsibility to choose your area of research, and then in consultation with your research guide and with your research with your teachers, you come down to a narrower area, because all kinds of research are time bound. Either you have 1 year for MPhil students to write down the research dissertation, or you have 5 or 6 years for the PhD students. Whatever it may be, it is necessary that you choose your area, because choice of the area you cannot arrive at one fine morning, because it is the result of your readings for years together, for decades together. So your research area must be your own choice, and only when you have make some progress in the research area, you can decide that, well, this is a particular topic on which I can work for 1 year or 2 years or 4 years or 5 years for that matter. So this is where you need to consult your teacher very, very intimately, because only then the teacher can really help you, because the teacher knows that you have some ideas, that your background is perfect for research studies, and he can help you in choosing the research topic, and therefore it will be your own endeavor to choose your research topic. Now, when you come down to your research topic, the problem that becomes important is what are your own assumptions about the area, about the topic, okay? What do you want to do in your dissertation? So these are the two important questions that you may think of. Now, when you think of what do I want to do here, this is your aim, okay? Because you have, maybe vaguely, you have certain ideas that you need to do this. You need to have certain researches on particular directions, and that is a bit wider in scope. But then you will have to jot down certain research questions which are your objectives of research. Okay, these questions, this formulation of the questions is not at all an easy task. But then when you have some idea about the research area and you have seen what other people have done, it might be useful, it might be very relevant for you, it might be very useful for you to formulate the research questions. So formulation of the research questions also depend on your background studies. Here also comes a new task for you, and this is called literature review. Now, literature review is a very significant component, is a very useful component for doing your research. What does this mean? This term, literature review? Literature review, obviously, as the term suggests, is a review of all literatures that have already done in the area. Now, this word literature means that this is a corpus of works. It does not mean literary works. It means, it does not mean creative works. It means that the critical works that have already done. So it refers to the corpus of works which have already been done in your research area. Now, this research area, you know, is very, this literature review is very, very significant in the sense that it gives you certain ideas about what to do about your own research area. Why do you undertake to do the research, literature review? Literature review gives you a larger perspective. This is the first utility of the literature review. It gives you a larger context to work within. Okay, you will be working on, say, African American literature, and you have already done a good number, a wide reading on a number of authors and the secondary materials. So primary materials are those which are the creative works, which are the texts on which you work, and the secondary materials are the critical works that that have been done on the primary sources. So from that point of view, you will have to have a good idea about the corpus of the secondary materials. The secondary materials actually will suggest the areas. You read the articles and jot down the points, certain main points, that these are the areas, these are the points already made by such and such author. Okay, so you go on while you read a particular critical material, you should do certain things. Number one, you jot down all the publication details, because that material may not be available later at a later date. Okay, then while documenting and citing your sources, you might find difficulties. So while you read a particular secondary material, you write down the details of the secondary materials, publication details, etc., etc. And if you want to use any quotation, any particular point, also jot down the page number. So taking notes and keeping a diary are very useful activities for you while undertaking the literature review, and also while actually writing and organizing your materials in the dissertation proper. So this is one very important point which you should keep in mind. So literature review gives you a wider context to from where you can work. Okay, so your work will not be a very shallow kind of work. Your work will be interlaced, intertexts with other works as well. So there will be a dialogue between your work and the works of other research scholars in your own area. So this dialogue is necessary for giving you a wider context. But most important usefulness of literature review is that it maps the area. What do I mean by mapping the area? It maps the area in the sense that you can see on the map that these are the areas where already researches have been done. And these are the areas where researches have not been done. So this is a kind of a mapping. You can remember Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and you can find the protagonist, the speaker, the narrator, Marlowe. You see, he looks at the maps and he notices that there are many areas. There are some areas which have been discovered, and there are areas which are dark areas, which are areas about which we do not know anything. So from that point of view, the dark areas, the areas where no illumination have been made, are the areas where you can really work on. So literature review actually does this. It maps the area and it excludes for you certain areas where the works have been done, and it gives you an idea of certain other areas where works have not at all been done, or done in a haphazard way, or not done properly. So you have your areas where you can do. Now you have the areas where your research topic can be rooted. Okay, so choose from those areas. This is called research gap. This research gap is very important, and unless and until you do the research gap, you cannot have proper idea about your own researches. So the secondary readings while doing the literature review can also trigger your imagination and trigger your rational ideas. You may get new ideas from a particular idea. Okay, you can come to a particular point in a particular research article, but then from that article, from that point, you can have your own ideas about certain dimensions which have not been covered by the research scholar, by the writer of the article. So literature review is very important from that point of from that perspective. Now, I have talked about certain areas, certain very preliminary kind of concepts like aims, research aims, like research objectives, like research questions. Okay, your research objectives becomes research questions when you formulate them in the form of interrogative sentences. Okay, so research objectives and research questions are more or less the same thing. From the formulation of the question, and the formulation of the questions is not an easy task. You will find it very, very difficult. So from that point of view, you see that this kinds of the preliminary things must be done in the initial phases. So this is the first point, the first kinds of facts and figures and concepts that I wanted to talk about. Now, you see that within an hour or so, I cannot cover all the areas, but I will just give you certain areas and keep certain other areas for future discussions. Okay, that can be decided later. Now, while doing this research, what we are focused on is actually making knowledge claim. What do you mean by knowledge claim? The term is very much in currency in science subjects, while people actually talk about knowledge claims, they talk about their research findings. Okay, they talk about what they have discovered, what they have found, what they have come at the end of their researches. So knowledge claim is a very interesting term, in the sense that knowledge claim can give you certain false idea. Knowledge claim does not mean that you have really reached the knowledge. You have really arrived at the knowledge. Okay? Knowledge is relative, and there is perhaps no single knowledge about a single area, and there is no knowledge with a capital K. So knowledge claim means a kind of idea, a kind of confirmation which you believe to be true, and this is what we explained as knowledge claim. So what happens is that the laws of gravity, as we know it today, may be changed in a big way or in a small way in any future research later. Then this earlier knowledge claim will no longer stand the test of time, and the new research inputs will come in our way. As I always mention, you know that the earlier, it was in the medieval period, it was thought, and it was confirmed almost in the contemporary knowledge system, that the earth moves around the sun. Okay, so I'm sorry, the sun moves around the earth, because this is how we see things happening before our eyes. It was supposed to be a claim, a knowledge claim, but then later on, as you know, it was proved to be wrong. So knowledge claim is something which you believe to be true, but which may not be true in the ultimate analysis, which may prove to be false in a later date. So knowledge claim is always a relative matter, and it is not the final point. So from that point of view also, we can arrive at the decision that our researches are tentative. When we look at the entire corpus of researches, we'll find that each and every word is a bit tentative, okay, which may be proved false later on. Okay, knowledge nuggets are built, but the knowledge nuggets may be rejected later. Okay, and on the basis of the rejection, what happens, the new ways are opened. So the rejection is not a negative matter, but rejection is a very positive attitude, as a positive thing, in the sense that you now know that these are the things which have been proved wrong already by the new researchers, and therefore I can move on to such and such areas. So it also, in conjunction with the research gaps, can provide a new kind of idea about where you can really work on. Now, we come to the question, what is research? As you know, research, resuggesting, a repetition of search, rather repetitions of search, and repetitions suggest that the knowledge claims may not be true, knowledge claims may be proved false later on. So the word research is always invested with a positive sense of moving forward, searching and searching again and searching again. And when you search again, even in humanities, even in research areas of English studies, what matters is that you are never satisfied. After the end of your research period, you must have to submit your dissertation. But then that does not mean that you are satisfied. So it is said that the real research begins after you submit your dissertation, PhD or MPhil dissertation. Real research begins only after that, because you have already a feel of the field, a feel of the kinds of arguments, the kinds of works that have been already done in the areas. So research is the unveiling of new facts, unveiling of new interpretations. It means that you discover something new. For example, if we have access to proper archives, proper museums, proper archival details, you might find a new fact about Shakespeare or Ben Jonson, or say Hardy or Dickens. So you see that if you can really go to a particular archive which houses all the papers of Dickens or Hardy or Lawrence, and you discover a new letter written by him or written to him, which reveals a new fact or some new facts or some new aspects which have never been discovered earlier. And this will be a real finding for you. So this is called a finding, a discovery, or an invention. So invention, discovery, new facts and new figures, these are important areas for every kind of research, be they in science, natural sciences, or social sciences, historical sciences, or in literary studies. So archival research from that point of view is a wonderful source from where you can find new nuggets of truth, new facts, new attitudes. So facts and figures are one aspect of the research. If you can do that, your research will be a real research. You can build up your arguments on the basis of that particular discovery. So from that point of view, this is one kind of research. But think of us, poor people who are located in places like India, countries like India, and who do not have real access to real archives and museums and libraries, British Library, for example. If you want to do research in Indian writing in English, for example, you may not find certain documents or certain originally published book, either in English or in Bengali or in Hindi, You may not find that book or document in India, but you can find it, you may find it in the British Library in England, and we cannot access that library right now here. So from that point of view, you see that we are at a disadvantageous position so far as researches are being done. Now, the location matters. The third world locations actually is a kind of handicap. But thanks to technology, advancement of technology, thanks to new search engines and Jester and our subscription of Jester or Project Muse or any other search engines, for example, we can access a lot of things. And right now, archives are opening up. Various kinds of archives which are actually under the control of different universities or different other organizations. They are opening their own archives. For example, you see School of Social Science, the Center for Social Science in consultation with certain other institutions in Europe have opened up a new archive on the journals published in English, written in English, journals published from India, either from Bengal or from other places like Lucknow. Those are being digitalized. Okay, so these digital libraries also help us in a big way, and we can access materials with the help of a click, the click of the mouse. So from that point of view, you see that finding out archival materials have become easier, and this can lead you to the discovery of new facts and figures. This is one aspect of research, why we call it research. And this may be even now difficult for us to do now. But then what can we do? We can do another thing. We can bring in new perspectives. Our perspectives are unique perspectives. So when you do your researches, and even if you have not found any new fact or figure or anything like any new letter or new document or new manuscript, what you can do is that on the basis of your textual analysis, you can add new perspectives. Okay? So, for example, you can add feminist perspectives, you can add post-colonial perspective. You can even do a research from the perspective of intersectional studies, okay? Which means that you combine, you believe that marginalization is a result of a number of factors, not only one factor like gender, for example. So when you combine different factors like gender, class, age, ability, standard, disability, etc., and when you take all these factors together, you find that when you think of all those factors together, you can find that a text actually can be revealed, illuminated in a new perspective. So what perspectives you will take depends on you, but then doing research from this point of view, this perspective will be also a very, very meaningful exercise. So what we mean by research? When we sum up, we can say that research means revelation of either new facts and figures, revelation of new phenomenon or new text or new fact or figure, or secondly, it may mean application of a new perspective. So you can do your research from any one of these 2 points, or you can make both the points important for your researchers. Okay, I think I am more or less clear about these things. Now I will just make a very in short. I will make a cautionary note. Now that the world has been thrown open to us with the help of technology, the texts and both primary and the secondary, all kinds of documents are available to us or are made available to us. All these documents can be accessed from our libraries or any other library that you can approach. But the cautionary note relates to the use of the internet. Number one, be cautious about using not authentic sources in the internet. For example, Wikipedia is not considered to be an authentic source. So don't quote Wikipedia sources if you can. You can think about other authentic sources in the internet, other documents that can be reliable, and you can take help of that, but be very cautious about the use of the sources, the use of the documents, which are fuzzy documents, which may not be reliable documents, which may be even false documents. So from these points of view, you should be cautious about the kind of sources that you should use. Secondly, you should be very much cautious about plagiarism. More so because the plagiarism softwares are widely available now. Almost all the higher institutions have at their disposal some plagiarism software or other. So with the help of this, you can easily arrive at the exact number, exact percentage of imitation in your own work or repetition in your own work. So plagiarism is something that can come even without knowing that this amounts to plagiarism. What do you mean by that? I will come to one particular fact, one particular kind of plagiarism. I will not go to other kinds of plagiarism. But what is important is that you know that you should be cautious about your own writings as well. When you quote from your own published writings, what happens is that you are claiming twice. Your published work is already there, and you claim that. And if you don't quote from your own sources published earlier, it will amount to what we call self-plagiarization. So without referring to your own articles properly, even your own article properly, without actually using quotation marks at the proper places, without acknowledging the source properly, if you don't do these things, you will be resorting to plagiarism. As I say, plagiarism etymologically means lifting. You are lifting even from your own, you can lift from your own source as well, from your own writings or books or articles as well. So please don't do this because you may not know this fact. Okay? So from that point of view, this is very important because these are the things that you should be cautious of, young researchers should be cautious of. In the West, almost all the institutions in their websites will caution you about this. There will be inevitably a section where it will be said what amounts to plagiarism, and you will be warned against plagiarism. So I'm not going into details of plagiarism, but you should be very cautious about this, particularly young research scholars who might be tempted to quote from somewhere without using quotation marks, or who might be tempted to use his or her own works without acknowledging that properly. So be cautious about this. These are the 2 points that I will like to make. Now, I think I should also talk about 3 concepts, three very important concepts, and these 3 very important concepts are used in our field in a different sense. This is the beginning of our own research methodologies in humanities, in English studies. These are the 3 words about which I always talk when I take a class on methodology. And these 3 terms have been actually referred to, used by Gabriel Griffin in this book, Research Methods for English Studies. You see, Gabriel Griffin in her introduction to this book introduces these 3 concepts: research methods, research methodologies, and research skill. What is research skill? The other day, I also addressed the students of another college in Malda, and I talked about the same things. This is a repetition, but I think that it might be useful. If I don't use this, talk about this, it will be an incomplete one. So what are these things, these ideas? Research skill is something you can guess from the word skill that you are able to do. You have the skill to do. For example, we senior people are not always able to do our PPTs, PowerPoint projects, PowerPoints. We cannot do that properly. Or even if, say, I can do that, I cannot show that on the YouTube or on the Google Meet. So you see that this is a skill that I may not have. But this is a skill that every research scholar must have these days. This is a new day, this is a new time. The old time of researchers, when the people said that there is nothing called methodology in English studies, what your teacher says is your methodology, that kind of idea is no longer viable. That is gone. So you should have new skills. You should have new skills in the IT. So, for example, you should know how to cite a quotation properly according to APA style, or according to the 8th edition or MLA handbook. I may not know that, but you will have to have ideas about that. And every edition makes fresh changes. You should be familiar with the changes. Those of you who are doing MPhil or PhD or even researchers at the MA level, PG level, you may be asked to write your dissertations on the basis of MLA Handbook 8th edition, then you cannot do it according to the rules and regulations, norms of the 7th edition. So this is a skill. When we did our MPhil and PhD researchers, this was passed for research methodologies. Okay, everywhere in India, and maybe outside as well, what we meant by research methodology was a tiny sheet of document called MLA Handbook. Now, it was not a handbook at the time. It became a handbook later. The early editions were found in printed sheets. Okay, so you see that these skills are very, very necessary. You want to search a book, you want to have a book. You need to know how you can get the book. Okay, the book may not be available in the market. Okay, but this book may be available in archive.com. So you should know, you should have also the instinct that this book might be available in such and such sites. This is an instinct, but this is also a skill. Not all of us can do that. So research skill is something that you should be very careful about. You should have this skill, and we mean research skill means particularly this, and for us students of literature, this is absolutely a necessary step that we should have. If you don't have skill in a particular area, young scholars, you should try to acquire that as early as possible. The second point that I the second concept that I want to focus on is research method. You know that we often use the two words research method and research methodology interchangeably. What is method? Method is also methodology. Or sometimes we say the combination of all the methods is called research methodology, which is not true. Okay, you see that from our own point of view, research method is how you conduct your research. What do we mean by that? For example, your research area is about the reception of the films, films based on Shakespeare's works. Okay, reception in a section of your students. Okay, or reception in Malda, or reception in West Bengal. Then the kind of method that you should take is not the same kind of method that I can take while analyzing Shakespeare's plays, later plays, for example. Okay, in the later case, we do take help of textual analysis method, but in the former, we take help of a method which is called reception method. So you go to the students, or you go to the people who read or who see, who witness, who see the films, and take their and note down their reactions, their responses. So it depends on survey method. It depends on interview methods. So there are many, many methods. And you can take help of more than one method. For example, you can take help of interview method, also survey method, and also textual analysis method. So you can have three methods simultaneously in the area of your research. But the area of your research will determine the kind of methods that you will take up for your research. Okay, so these two are interrelated. The methods and the research topic, they are interrelated. So this is method, and you can have more than one method. But what is methodology? According to Gabriel Griffin, methodology is nothing but the theoretical framework, the kind of theories that the critical framework that you adopt for yourself, for your research, is the research methodology. For example, when you talk about, say Amitabh Ghosh's novels, you can take post-colonialism as your methodology. Okay, when you take, for example, T.S. Eliot's works, now poems, early poems, for example, you can take help of modernism as a methodology. The modernist arguments, the modernist frameworks as a methodology. But what you should be cautious that you should not take two methodologies unless and until they really gel. Okay? You cannot take two kinds of methodologies which are polar opposites. Okay? But then if you want to do some work on Mahashweta Devi's works in translation or in original, you can obviously approach the novels or the short stories from feminist point of view. But then feminism, you can also take post-colonial feminism. So you take two research methodologies. One is post-colonialism and the other one is feminism, but they can gel so well that you can talk of many feminisms. You can talk of Western feminism, you can talk of third world feminism, you can talk of Indian feminism, you can talk of Dalit feminism, you can talk of many kinds of feminism. So there is no problem if you take these two methodologies and apply in the interpretation of your texts. So the difference between method and methodology is that, number one, there may be many methods, but you should have one method. Unless and until they gel, you cannot take two methods. Usually, you have one method. Why do I say that there should be one method? Otherwise, your research will not have the focus. A research work is a focused work. You cannot write about anything and everything under the sun. Your research, if you take up feminist approach, it should have only feminist approach. It should produce findings in accordance with that. So, according to the methodology, you will have your own method. When you have a different methodology, you may have a variable. The findings may be different. Okay, so the change of the research methodology, the shift in the research methodology will obviously result in a shift of the findings. The findings may not be the same again. So the findings and the methodology are interlinked. Okay. In fact, methodology, and the findings, these are, we divide these terms, we talk about these terms separately, but they are not really separate. While you do your work, they mix up seamlessly. Okay. They mix up naturally. Even you may not be aware how these methods and methodologies or other kinds of ideas, they mix up, they actually converge in your
work. So what matters is the work should be done in a proper way, in an objective way. Research is an objective kind of interpretation. So this objectivity is important, but the objectivity, you might also be aware, you have one kind of objectivity, I may have a bit different kind of objectivity. What do I mean by that? Subjectivity interferes sometimes. Our interpretation of objectivity may be different, but we should try to be as much impersonal as possible while we do our researches, which means that our own prejudices, our own, I, for example, may have a radical idea about something, politics, for example, or some social phenomenon, for example. But that should not interfere in my thesis. Even if that interferes, that should be based on a proper, impersonal, objective platform. The arguments should be objective. The logic should be there. Unless and until there is logic there, it cannot be impersonal. So objectivity is very important, but my objectivity, my kind of idea about objectivity may be a bit different from you, but that doesn't mean that we should take help of arguments which are objective, which are impersonal, which will help us in arriving at certain kinds of findings. So these are the some very important points that we can talk about. I do not know how much time I have. I have probably talked about an hour or so. May I take 5 or 10 minutes?
Yes, sir. Please, you carry on.
Okay, I will just talk about 2 more things and then I will stop. You see that when you think of a book, when you will try to, when you will submit your research paper, either in the form of a term paper or in the form of a dissertation, you will have a structure. Okay, but then there are some suggestions, there are some prescriptions which are often followed. Okay, usually a research dissertation has 3 parts. One is called, the first part is called front matters. The second part is called, that is the proper text, the second part. And the third part is called, the end matters, the front matters, which are obviously the preliminaries, the main part, which is the text, and the later parts, which are the back matters. Okay, why do I say this? Because some of you who are going to submit your research papers or dissertations might find this useful. This is a suggestion taken from Chicago style sheet actually. Okay, this is important because you have not only to arrange and organize your arguments, your documents, your arguments and your materials, but these materials will have to be organized in certain given manner. Please remember that your dissertations, our dissertations are not meant to be radical works. Please be pragmatic in the sense that you never know to which examiners, to which type of examiners your thesis may go. So be moderate in your approaches, be moderate in your opinions, don't be very radical, That is my advice, because it is just the beginning of your research. Try to learn the rope when you do your research at the initial phase, and you learn how to organize your thesis. Usually the chapter division is also the fixing of a title and the organization of your materials into chapter divisions. These are very important things. It will certainly depend on the kind of area that you have chosen, kind of topic that you have chosen. Now, usually you see that there are 4 or 5 chapters, and I think that is the right kind of sections, the right kind of chapter divisions that you can have. You have introduction, which you may call chapter 1, or even if you don't want to call it chapter 1, this is the chapter 1 for all practical matter. Then there will be some more chapters, specifically 3 or 4 chapters based on your text or your area of studies, and then there will be your conclusion. And there may be appendix, and there will be certainly bibliography, selected bibliography. But then you see what are the front matters, and I use these front matters and the end matters specifically because you know that these front matters or the end matters or the back matters, how will you use the pagination, that is also very important. I will read from the Chicago the Chicago style sheet, 6th edition, a paper. Please listen to this very carefully, young research scholars. A paper or a thesis or a book for that matter has 3 main parts. The front matter, which are nothing but preliminaries. The text, which is obviously the middle matter, and the back matter, which is the reference matter. In a long paper, each of these parts may consist of several sections, each beginning with a new page. Okay? For example, in the beginning, in the front matter, you will have to insert an acknowledgement. Okay? So acknowledgement is also related to ethical matter. It is basically an ethical matter simply because you need to acknowledge your indebtedness to each and every source. Not only persons, not only your teachers, not only your friends, but everybody that helped you in finishing your research paper or your thesis. Acknowledgement basically, therefore, is an ethical duty for a research scholar. But then it should be included in the beginning in front matters. Okay, so you see that the content page, for example, is another item in the front matter. In this way, there may be quite 3-4 kinds of items that may be included in the front matter. How will you paginate them? This is important because unless and until you know this, there might be some kind of problems. You will definitely make errors there, commit errors there. Please listen to this very, very carefully. There are 2 categories of pagination. The front matter is numbered with consecutive lowercase Roman numerals. Please keep this in mind. So you cannot use Arabic numerals in the front matters. Okay? There are two categories of pagination. One is in the front matter, for example, you will have to use lowercase. You know what is lowercase? Small letter, Roman numerals. So lowercase and Roman numerals. These two things you should keep in mind. Centered at the bottom of the page, you can take liberty in this. You may not use it in the middle of the bottom, but you can take it in the right side or the left side. That depends on you. And the rest of the work, which means the text and the back matters, you will have to paginate them with Arabic numerals. Is it clear? So you can use two kinds of numerals. One is lowercase Roman numerals in the front matter, and the rest of the thesis, which covers the text and the back matters, you will have to use Arabic numerals. And I will read a bit more from there before I stop. Although all pages are counted in the pagination right from the front page, some of the preliminaries do not have page numbers typed on them. For example, the front page, that you usually do not paginate. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a page number. It has a page number. You have to take that notionally. So at the beginning is a notional page number, and then the next page will be paginated as a second page in the front matters, in the section of front matters. It will be, the second page may be paginated properly. It will be typed there, okay, composed there. For some of the preliminaries do not have page numbers typed on them. For term papers, thesis, dissertations, a title page might include the name of the university or college that you know, usually centered near the top of the sheet, the full title of the paper, of course, and the date, the name of the writer, etc. should be included in the title page. Although the title page counts as page 1 in Roman numerals, lowercase, the number is not shown on this. This is a technical matter, but I think it is important. And if you have this knowledge, you will feel much more confident. Okay, so these are some of the areas about which I wanted to talk. In this, I have not talked about some of the areas which are equally important. For example, how to cite and document, or there are many other matters, how to quote, how to make a quotation mark. Okay, whether it should be given a single quotation mark or a double quotation mark. So formatting is important. I have not discussed formatting at all. I have not discussed many other items. Okay, because in a 1 hour lecture, it may not be possible, but I'm sure that you know about this. And if you don't know about this, it will be covered during the next course of your classes or elsewhere. Okay, here I would like to put a stop. Thank you very much. And if you have questions or comments to make, please go on.
Sir, before we move on to the questions, I mean, on behalf of the Department of English, let me extend our heartiest thanks to you for giving us such a wonderful lecture today. It was really mesmerizing. We were listening. I mean, all our students were listening to you with absolute attention. And in your long talk, I would say you have touched upon certain basic areas of research methodology. It's the development of research methodology, and the way it has started functioning, particularly in the case of English studies. And then you've you've spoken about these important concepts in research methodology, like what is the difference between a research area and a research topic, starting from there to pagination and other technical matters. We have basically amongst our students today, we have basically the PG students, the postgraduate students who are entering into the realm of the nitty-gritties of academic writing. But we also have a couple of our PhD scholars as well, who would be extremely benefited by your lecture. So may I just begin by asking you just one thing? I mean, what is right now the system? I mean, do we have to put on the list of works cited at the end of every chapter, or one bibliography would do at the end of the whole thesis? This is from the perspective of the, yeah, sir.
Yes. You know that as days go on, we are becoming more and more minimalist, okay? And we also think of the poor trees, as you know. We do not, we avoid using paper, as less paper as possible, okay? So you see that the system that is evolving is that don't use pages unnecessarily. This is the basic principle, okay? So you need not put at the end of each chapter works cited, although it is initially very, very useful, because I always ask my students to, when they submit their chapters to me for evaluation or something, examination, what I ask is that please complete your paper or chapter with all the technical details, including works cited. Why I do it is that the student may forget to include or insert one particular document, or he or she may not have proper idea about what to do. But when he ultimately submits his thesis, there is no need to retain the work cited at the end of each and every chapter. So please think in these terms that we will include selected bibliography or select bibliography at the end of towards the end of the thesis, and we will not use work cited at the end of each chapter, okay? This will save many pages, and also this will be helpful for us, although we'll have to go back to the last page again and again, but even then it will save some pages, and this is the new regulation. Thank you.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you. Okay. Now I will ask our students if you have any questions to sir. You can put it. Please put your video, turn your video on, and introduce yourself, and then ask the question.
I have a question here. Sir, what is the role of the time limit in preparing a dissertation paper? We have to prepare a dissertation paper in our MA level within around 4 months. As we have very limited time, how should we proceed in this context? I think this is a very important question. If you have 4 months to complete your paper, the preparation must begin from not just when you begin officially, but the preparation should be there even before that. So you actually have to have some preparations, including the selection of the topic, the selection of the main text or texts, selection of the approach or methodology. About method, you don't have to do much unless and until it is a very special kind of term paper or dissertation. So you will have to do all these things prior to you start writing. So these 3 months should be for 3 months to writing your thesis. I do not know how many pages your thesis will run. Okay, I do not know the word numbers, but decide according to your own judgment. Okay, and please keep 1 month for checking, organizing, and reorganizing, and you will find writing composing the works cited or bibliography a tough thing. You may have left some details, or you have not jotted down some details. That's why I said in the beginning, you should be very careful about jotting down your points. So you will find many loopholes in your thesis. This 1 month, last month, should be devoted to that. You will find many problems, for example, grammatical problems. So refine your writing by organizing properly, by inserting new materials, and taking advice from your teachers. So it will not do when the official time period begins. The time will tick-tock. The time will tick away your energy. So please remember that your effort should begin earlier. I think there is another question. I'm a PG student of UGB. I am a novice in research methodology, sir. I really enjoyed all. Okay, sir. In the beginning, you talked about some terms related to methodology, like hypothesis, etc., and also that those are from scientific disciplines. So, sir, can we entirely agree that the concept of research and research methodology are from science discipline? Initially, we are indebted to the model that the science and the social sciences offered, but we are on our way to devising our own kind of methodologies. This is a process, this is a system, this is a work in progress. We can take up help from other people, like social sciences, for example. Hypothesis, for example, is a very important idea that we have taken from science and social science, which is for us an instinctual act, an act of instinct. Okay, we act on instinct. Hypothesis is some kind of guess, some kind of instinct that these are the directions towards which my research will proceed. Okay, so we will arrive at such and such findings. This is hypothesis. This may be proved right, this may be proved wrong. But even if it is proved wrong, as I said earlier, doesn't matter, because you have done one wonderful thing, that you have mapped one area that cannot be taken by any future scholar. Okay, so in that way, you have contributed to the map making. So I think I have answered your question. If any other question?
Yes, is there any other question?
If you have any other question.
Sir, there's a question from Wasim Akram who says, sir, how should we discuss validity and reliability in literary research studies?
Actually, these are the ideas, validity and reliability, both have come from social science researchers and even from science researchers. These are integral parts of social science and science research processes, because they make a hypothesis and they take help of either laboratory test, because if you already have a hypothesis, you will have to test it. Okay, so testing is there, and testing is done in order to find the validity, whether your assumptions are valid or not, whether your discoveries are valid or not. So you see that validity and reliability both are basically very important for the students of science and social science. But for us who are involved in researches in literary topics, literary text, validity and reliability does not come as very important areas, because what happens is that you cannot prove this. You cannot prove in the way science proves or social science proves, through surveys and etc., through statistical methods. You can prove something, test something, but we do not have any such tool at our disposal, because we deal with matters which are the products of emotion. So we can take help of some emotional components with the help of psychology, of course, but we may not be experts in psychology. So I don't think that validity and reliability are that much important for us who have been doing researches in literary studies, in English studies. There should be some valid points, but that should be based on our arguments. So arguments will prove whether we are valid or whether we have done reliable kinds of researches. Any other question?
Right, sir. Right. If we
yes.
do not have any other questions, we can call it a day for today. I think we do not have any other questions. Thank you to our students. Ask these questions, and of course, sir, your illuminating lecture today. Basically, we have started off with your lecture today, and a number of other talks are also coming up, which are primarily for our students. And I hope they will be benefited very much by these illuminating talks. Thank you once again, sir, for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much, Sharipendra and your colleagues, Amit and others.
Now, তাহলে আমরা এটা end করছি এবারে। Yes,
okay.
I mean, I think Amit is not.
Okay, all colleagues and students.
So, yes. You